morning, Father Con.
Hi, Adriana. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
Wonderful. I hope you're not going to be distracted. I'm not sure if you can hear the sound of birds behind me.
That would not distract me. And my window's open, so we may get birds or people, lawn mowers, people cutting their lawn.
I know.
And this weather this weekend is supposed to be very glorious.
Absolutely. We need this. I think
Yeah.
the announcement on Thursday that we're going to be in these restrictions until June the 2nd. I mean, it wasn't a surprise to anybody, but when it's confirmed, you just go.
Yes. And that's certainly, I was oblivious. Work has been busy, actually, so it's been a nice distraction. But my husband told me, and same thing. He said the same thing. I knew it was coming, but to hear it is just another
I know. But then the weather changed, which was beautiful. Thursday evening was gorgeous. And then we had the good news on Friday that, looking Dr. Tam, she was smiling. I don't know if you noticed it. I don't know if you saw her. I just saw a brief reference to it in the news. And she was actually smiling, and she was talking about how in July, we'll be able to sit outside with others who are vaccinated, and we can take our masks off. And I guess the indoor piece is going to be later, but if we can get to 75% vaccinated, we're getting there. My sister and her family live in England, and I mean, it's wonderful to hear how things
opening up.
Yeah, my brother lives in Ireland, and that's gradual. There's a slow, they're being a little more cautious and slower. Yeah. They're ahead of us in terms of the vaccines. So it's coming. It's a little coming. I think many people had anticipated, but it's there.
Okay, so if that's the case, Father Con, I'd like to reserve a date with you. We'll sit on the patio behind you. We'll have our coffee, and we'll have a chat in person.
Yeah,
in person. So this week is Ascension Sunday, and it is also World Communications Day. So we're going to be talking about Ascension, and I'm sort of projecting my issues on our conversation this week, because every year growing up, especially when I was getting older and could really understand the faith, I'd have a sadness on Ascension Sunday when I would read those words when Jesus was taken up, and it would be like, oh, but no, stay with us. It's so much better when you're here, Jesus. And so we'll talk about the process of, when we start something new and then letting go, and then embracing something new or someone new and then letting go. It's a tough process in life, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you're sharing over the last few weeks, especially for the weekday liturgies, we've been journeying with the disciples as they're preparing for this leave taking. Mm-hmm. And they have a little bit of the same reaction, Lord, please stay. Please stay with us. We haven't quite finished the programming yet. We haven't taken all of the notes that we need.
Yes.
For the rest of the journey. And what I love about the gospel, especially that speaks about this leave taking, what I love about it is it's almost, you can almost hear there's a little bit of frustration in Jesus' voice saying, "Oy vey, look, I have to go, and I have other work to do, and the other work that I have to do is that I have to go to prepare a place for you." We use that gospel text often.
Yes.
For funerals, especially.
I love it.
Yeah, and I love to talk about the fact that Jesus moves on to complete that other work, and yet what he's been teaching the disciples is that even though I go, I will be with you always. And so they have to manage how they're going to now live that out as they are thrown out on their own without the presence of Jesus with them, as they're thrown out to go and to be good disciples in the world. And so that's, I think that the Feast of the Ascension sets us up beautifully for what happens the following week, which is Pentecost.
Yes.
Which is, the awakening to that which we have received. And then the Great Commission, now go, and I will be with you. I will walk with you. I will journey with you.
Mm-hmm. I always I think, as much as it fills me with sadness, because I don't like goodbyes. Sometimes change is exciting, but it always has, grief and that process of saying goodbye. I also think, though, we don't get the lesson until Jesus goes. Because once he goes, now the apostles can live the message, not just hear it. And in living it, we're with Jesus in a different way.
That's right. And I think that one of the things that the disciples have to learn, but I think it's also one of the things that we have to learn, is that we have to learn to do it our way. We're not clones.
No.
And each of us has our own, that lovely letter of Paul where he talks about the gifts that everybody has given. Mm-hmm. Some are teachers, some are apostles. I think that's where we need to help each other, is to discern what discipleship looks like for us individually. This is a confession moment. I get very frustrated often with the how-to manuals that we're presented with about how we are to live the Christian life, how we are to, and because it cannot be formulaic. And it's not a ticking off of all of the things that we're supposed to do. I mean, this comes back to what we've been talking about several times on this communication journey that we've been on, is that cultivating our prayer life is cultivating cultivating that interior work that helps us to do what it is that we need to do better. I love the Jesuit. Way of the discernment process, because it grounds you in. It grounds you in being real. I hope that's making sense.
Of course it does.
Yeah, it grounds, where, as I begin this new day, and as I open myself to the will of God in this day, let me be open to the many ways that I will encounter grace, that I will encounter God, that I will be the hands of the Lord, that I will be the eyes of the Lord, that I will be the feet of the Lord in the day. And then that there's a great honesty when we come back at the end of the day to look back and to, okay, as I look over my day, what do I give thanks for? It's interesting that the examine, that Jesuit way, it's interesting that the examine begins not with the negative, but with the positive.
Yes.
Where did I see grace? Where was I an instrument of grace? today.
Yes.
Oh,
Where
and
where were the consolations?
absolutely,
And then where were the
and where were the
desolations?
desolations? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love the Ignatian way. In
Mhm.
fact, there's that lovely app that I'll use somewhat regularly, the Pray As You Go
Oh,
by the Jesuits in the UK.
wonderful resource.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
it. And even sometimes when we do prayer as for staff, I will just share my screen. This is all virtual. I will share my screen and we just go through that prayer that they've put together because
Mhm.
it's beautiful. It incorporates music and then they read the gospel and then there's a reflection and then they just lead it all. And it's calming. It slows us down. By sharing my screen, then I can also participate in the prayer with my staff.
That's right. And
I love it.
and the real secret is we're not talking. We're listening. which
Yes.
which is the which I yeah, again, it's the and I guess we have to grow into learning these things, but
Well, I certainly find now that I've started the second half of my life,
mhm.
because I read Richard Rohr, Father Richard Rohr, Father Ron Rolheiser. They even did a conference together, and I listened to the CD, and they talk about the first half of life and the second half of life, and there are different themes for each. And certainly, in as I'm in my second half of life, I can appreciate the silence more. But when
Yeah.
I was younger, and they acknowledge this, when you're younger and you're in your 20s, you're starting your career, you want to get out in the world. You're full of energy because you have to be. You're starting your career, you're getting yourself out there, you're separating your identity from the family identity and you're carving your own path. But in the second half of life, we don't need to do that. So we do slow down. We can appreciate the silence. And it's just a matter, really, of having those in the first half of life and those in the second half of life, just respecting the gifts and blessings that each bring to the full spectrum of a lived life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, there's a name that you're going to hear quite a bit about in the next little while. It's Charles de Foucauld, who was a French nobleman who went off first to Israel to Nazareth, and then to North Africa. Um, I came across his story when I was in my early 20s, I think. And there's something fascinating about reading stories like that, and you just want to go off into the desert and go off and live this heroic life that he lived.
Yeah.
And yet, when you read his story, some other people say, well, what's heroic about that? But I think one of the things that younger people especially will be interested in his story is that he teaches us to use the ordinary, and to see the miracles that take place in the ordinary, and that it isn't about and this actually does lead back to Richard Rohr and especially his book Falling Upward,
Mm-hmm.
that life's journey is a journey to wisdom. And it's lived wisdom. It's wisdom
Yes.
that comes with
Yeah.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's that romantic, I think, search for wisdom. But what he taught us was the wonderful wisdom that's found in the ordinary rhythm of daily life. And there are writings. He has writings, but he was, it wasn't by preaching or teaching. It was by living among
Mm.
and cultivating friendships, listening, working alongside, um, being the best that he that he could be, and seeking others out who could help him to be the best that he could be. When young followers began to kind of spend time with him, and they wanted to go further in building community, he said, "But we have community."
Yeah.
What should I do? What should I do? Go and sit with that lady over there who's dying, and just sit with her. Listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
into the field. Go into the field and plant. Plant the herbs. Plant the vegetables that we need for the winter. Find God in the ordinary. Find God in the task of planting.
Yeah.
So when Jesus says to his disciples, I have to go, I have other work to do, but I'm going to be with you always. Yeah, I'm going to be with you in the ordinary things. I'll be with you in the great things, but for everybody, I will be with you in the ordinary things. I think I told you about this. I met this Buddhist abbot when I was traveling in Southeast Asia, and I often say this, that sometimes it's when you're out of your own comfort zone that you and Richard Rohr talks about this actually, that you get the knock on the head going, wake up here. And I met the abbot of a monastery, a very distinguished man, very well-known man, lived here in Canada for a period of time, sought out as a wisdom figure in the Eastern tradition.
Right.
And he didn't tell me this, but one of the young monks in the monastery told me this, that every second year, he went back to his home monastery. And when he went back to his home monastery, he just went back as a brother monk. He didn't go back as the abbot. And when he went back, his task in the monastery was to clean the toilets.
Wow. And so he would do that.
Yeah.
He would do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Humble yourself to, yes, humble. There's sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes I think it's very helpful.
And that's interesting about Charles Foucault saying, find God in the ordinary, Jesus becoming human, sharing in our human nature. It's almost like we're being given permission to then be human.
Absolutely.
And we don't need to be scared of being human. And then part of being human is knowing that we are part of nature. We are part of this. So it's no wonder that many people are finding solace in just spending time in nature, whether they go camping or they need to go for a hike, in the trails. Mm-hmm. There is just something about the wisdom in nature.
Absolutely. And I think, in the middle of in that when Richard, in Falling Upwards, when Richard Rohr starts looking into the second half of life.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that he is doing, like maybe this is something that we've been negligent within the church, in that we haven't talked enough about the fact that the spiritual life is work.
Mm-hmm.
That there is that the more you invest in that spiritual life, the richer the results
Yes.
will be for us. I think
Yes.
for us, and I think that one of the things he talks about, what I really, really appreciate, is that I'm putting this, I'm paraphrasing here, and maybe I'm not 100% accurate, but I think one of the things that he's advising the reader or the listener to do is to get your house in order. It's to deal with the stuff that you've been dragging around with in a big old bag, the big old bag of worries.
Mm-hmm.
Deal with it. Because the longer you carry it around, the heavier that it's going to be. I don't know if we've talked about this before or not. I'm actually working with a group at the moment who are working their way through falling upward.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
many of them are younger. They're definitely in that
The
first
first.
stage of life. And I think I think that's the stumbling block to the book, but it's also why I think it's really, really helpful to pursue it, because it's not all going to make sense now, but having this knowledge and having this insight will be helpful along the way.
Yes. You know, when you talk about carrying the bag of worries, the scene that comes to mind, have you seen The Mission with Robert De Niro?
Oh yeah.
You know, that scene where he feels so much guilt and shame for what he did to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the Jesuits managed to convince him to come. And of course, the indigenous peoples are scared of him because he was a big slave trader. And he feels so much remorse that he insists that as they're trekking through the jungle, he's going to carry all this heavy metal and tie it to him. And this is his penance. And he's insisting on it. One of the priests cut it off him. He goes and catches it, ties it back on. And he's even he's scaling the mountains for this. And there's a powerful scene where, so he makes it that far. They've encountered the indigenous community. And of course, they're scared of him at first. And this young boy comes forward, and it looks tense because he's got the knife. So you don't know if he's going to hurt him, for maybe he kidnapped other members of their community. But he goes, and instead of hurting him, he takes the rope, cuts it, and he pushes this net bag of metal over and it's almost like there's your redemption, there's your grace, you can let it go. And it was done by the indigenous who were hurt by him. It's a very powerful, and that's, yes, sometimes we have to carry it to make ourselves feel better, but at some point we have to let it go so it doesn't continue to define us. It can't define us.
Absolutely. When you look at somebody like Francis, when you look at the story of Francis Xavier, or when you look at some of the great heroic figures of the faith, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, look at Saint Francis.
Well, my favorite is, he's now a saint, I believe, Saint Oscar Romero.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely.
He's my hero.
In the Lutheran tradition, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. They all have these moments in life where they have to come to realize that I'm carrying stuff that's become a burden, and I need to let it down so that I can be free. You know, that goes back to that lovely gospel story in year A, when we have the story of the raising of Lazarus. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love that scene.
Unbind him
and let him go free.
Yes.
So what is Lazarus? What is Lazarus burdened with that he needs to be free? That's all of our question. That ultimately is the big, and that's what I really appreciate about Richard Rohr's work, and also Ron Rolheiser's work.
Yes.
That it's saying to us, the spiritual path is a wonderful path, is a great path. But if you're serious, then get serious about the work that's demanded of you.
And when we use the word that it's work, I like to phrase it or frame it in a way that to be in relationship with anybody, you have to make time for that person.
Absolutely.
And so the spiritual work that you and I are talking about is really just making time for God to be in relationship. Don't take this relationship for granted. Nobody likes being taken for granted. And so if you're going to grow in a relationship, you have to set time aside. You have to make dates. You have to, do things together. That's the spiritual life.
Yeah.
That's the spiritual life.
Yeah. A good friend of mine who he would describe himself as a fallen away Catholic. It's a term I absolutely detest because there's no such thing. But he every now and then he sends me articles, and he's a great fan of Sam Harris.
Okay.
And who is a great guru for the anti-religion, anti-organized religion, anti-faith,
Yes. Yes.
Harris, by the way, I don't believe fits into that category at all. However, so there was interesting. I still haven't replied to this friend of mine because I recognize that you have to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, one of the things he writes about, that Sam Harris writes about, in a very secular context, is the culture that we live in and the baggage that we carry around with us, and how we need the calm and the stillness and the quiet and that space and that place to help us to be unbound and set free.
Yes.
That even I think there's a recognition, even in the most secular part of society, that we grow up in families, we grow up in communities, we grow up in societies. We have stories, and sometimes stuff sticks with us.
Yes.
And we need to be unbound and set free. And I think that that's one of the wonderful things, again, going back to the Ascension. If you look at what Jesus was doing with the disciples on the journey of discipleship, on their apprenticeship, if you were, in the Galilee, all the way to Jerusalem, and in this block of time after the resurrection, is that I think he is helping them to free themselves. Because that's how you can become effective.
Yes.
Watching the way in which Jesus teaches in the Galilee, I think he's modeling for the disciples of how they teach, and Jesus is teaching from his experience. Look at the lilies of the field. Look at how they grow. Look at the mustard tree.
And it's all, and again, it's going to nature, finding the wisdom, finding God in the ordinary.
Absolutely.
And I love, speaking of being unbound, I love the line. And whenever I struggle with my own issues, I think of, I believe it's John 10:10. I came so they may have life and have it to the full.
Yeah.
And with the work, so I don't know if people watching are familiar with Brene Brown. She's got a PhD in social work, and she's done a lot of work and research on guilt and shame, and how the guilt we have and the shame that prevents us from living the lives that we want, or being the effective, parents, friends, sisters, family members, whatever we do, it prevents us from being really effective. And I always go back to that line in John's gospel. I came so they may have life and have it to the full. The guilt and the shame and the baggage we carry is not part of the life that Jesus came to give us, and to the full.
That's right.
And so that's my marker, my signpost, that if I'm struggling with something, and I'm feeling bad and shame and all this, I think, oh, wait a minute. What does Jesus say? Oh, this is not part of the life. Jesus does not want me to carry this guilt and this shame.
Absolutely. Well, you know, in the confusion in the religious experience today, and I think in the divisions we see within, certainly within the church, within the churches, within faith.
Yes.
I think that one of the things we're seeing played out before us is the internal conflict that's happening within, that
Yes.
has very little to do with the issue. Really, it's about something else. That's what I love about Pope Francis, and that whole the emphasis on sitting at the table together, working on common ground. What do we have in common with each other?
Yes.
And then telling the story. Tell me your story. I'm really curious. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes, and I think this again, Richard Rohr talks about this. Sometimes you have to go from one layer to the next layer to the next layer to the next layer. And all of a sudden in the story, this comes out.
Yes.
And you say, oh my God, you've been carrying that for so long. You know, what do we need to do to be able to let it down so that you are free?
Yes. Yes.
So,
And the other thing I think of, another gospel passage, when I think of the Ascension and I get sad when he's going, I think of the passage again in John's gospel where he says, I do not call you servants any longer. I call you friends. Servants do not know what the master is doing. I've told you everything that I know from my Father. And I think that's key. We're not Jesus' servants. We're not just, hey, go do this, go do that. And we, okay, Lord, okay. We're friends. We're now in the inner sanctum of that friendship. And so it's a different relationship. And that,
yeah,
as I'm saying goodbye on this Ascension Sunday, like, oh, but wait a second, I'm his friend. So yeah, he's not going to leave me.
absolutely. I mean, the most wonderful thing is that's happening is that the Ascension is about saying to Adriana, I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you.
And that is no,
Now
yes.
trust that I will be with you wherever you go. I will be there with you. I will be with you.
Hearing you say this, I'm having a moment, Father Con. But for anyone watching now, imagine that that's Jesus saying your name and saying that Jesus trusts you. So we all need to trust that God will be with us, but also God is with each of us, but through community as well. So we work together. So we're not alone.
That's right. It's
And
not.
so,
Yeah. It's
and
not,
we can't realize that until Jesus leaves.
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that's a lot to reflect on for this Ascension Sunday. And of course, it's World Communication Sunday. So, the power of technology, and look at these conversations you and I have been able to have. And I know there are regulars that wait for our video to come out. So that's nice. We are helping people just by talking.
Good. Very good.
So have a good week, Father Con.
Certainly will. And you too, Adriana. Have a wonderful week.
I wanted to let you know, last time we spoke, you mentioned a book by, I believe, Mark Carney called Values.
Yeah,
I want you to know that my copy will be coming this week.
Well, good for you.
Because I was looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, well, Father Con's talking about it. Okay. So I put it in a cart and it's coming. Along with Anne Garrido's next book, or latest book.
Okay, good.
So more book talk possibly next week.
All right. Thank you. Have a wonderful week.
Yes, you too.